There we go. All right, so thank you everyone for being here. Very excited to be back and to have our presenters with us today. So I'll give you kind of a quick overview of the agenda, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So we've got Garr from Rheaply and Dr. Howard Rosing from DePaul. They're going to each present, and then we're going to have a very interactive discussion. You know, I don't even want to quite call it a Q&A, because really bringing them here today and covering the topics of, you know, asset management and circular economy was something that everyone thought was an important 2020 topic. You know, we said that in November, and already it's now, you know, the following September, and lots has changed. So the way we look at asset management, you know, not only has it changed with the way our institutions are right now, but the asset-based community development is an aspect and a whole concept that Howard is really going to walk us through with his colleague Kim, who's here as well. And I hope that everyone can think about, you know, not only your institution or business that you work with and the projects you work on, but also individually, if this is important work to you, how might you further your understanding and your work on community-based efforts. And then we will have member updates and announcements at or around 4 o'clock is maybe when that transition will happen. And anyone who has to leave, please, you know, raise your hand and say something before you jump off if you have an announcement to share or a story you want everyone to hear. And then we'll just wrap up and talk a little bit about our November meeting before we break. So that's the plan. Mostly everyone is a member, but just for those who are here as guests, the Chicago Sustainability Task Force, we're a large group of everything from facility operators to event organizers, program coordinators. How we are similar is that we all take action and are trying to promote environmental awareness and efforts through the work that we do, getting together bi-monthly to share best practices and share resources and showcase each other's programs and learn from that, as we're doing today. So, you know, the highlight topics concept, I think we started in 2016, where instead of just kind of talking amongst ourselves for 2 hours, we bring in an expert to really inform us of something that we might not be our specialty. And so just be thoughtful that at the very end of this meeting, we're going to be always asking, you know, what's on your mind that we should be covering next year. But again, as I mentioned, asset management and just assets in general was something everyone thought was important. So just getting right into that. Garr, who's the chief of staff at Rheaply. Now, you know, a lot of us maybe have heard about Rheaply and the digital infrastructure that you guys provide to help circular economy. Some of us have heard or worked on the PPE work you're doing with the city of Chicago. Those of us who were on the call earlier today may have learned that Rheaply has has a partnership now with Lake County and is doing some kind of cool things there to really bring the business community into the idea of circular economy and actually being able to implement that within their organizations and across the county. So with that, Garr, if you could go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces in here, so good to see everybody again. I'm going to do a little bit of a hybrid presentation. I'm going to try to keep it short on what's our typical PDF and presentation, because I think I've given this out to some people and some people know what Rheaply is, but I still want to hit on some basics. And then I'm actually going to take us and guide us through a diagram of something that I mocked up and is kind of a circular vision, in a more organic circular vision for what local city circular economy could look like. And really, I think it's this diagram that spurs a lot of questions. So I'm excited about that. And I tend to learn things too about how I'm presenting information when I show people something like this. So I'm excited about that. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into quickly the PDF version, our standard slide deck to kind of show what Rheaply is all about. So hold on while I expand my my view of everybody. There we go, gallery view. So Rheaply, founded by, and I have this nice orange glow for my screen, Rheaply, founded by Dr. Gary Cooper. The idea started in an academic setting, all focused around assets that we find in large organizations. So assets for us, not being financial assets, but actual physical assets, fixed assets in an organization. So that could be research equipment, that could be office infrastructure, that could be IT or electronics related to any type of operations within an organization. So we just have targeted this as a moment or as an opportunity for us to really go after these types of investment and this type of infrastructure at these large organizations, because we think it's really not talked about as much. There are a lot of sexier things that are talked about, like plastics and cardboards and composting, frankly, that it's actually, from a large organizational standpoint, there's a huge amount of infrastructure spend every year on assets that they already own, and then things that are being put into the disposition cycle and either sent to landfill or scrapped, potentially unnecessarily. And so I'll explain more about that. So with these large organizations, we see that all of these things are stored away. They're stored sort of off-site. And this is an opportunity where, you know, frankly, when things are stored away, people tend to think of those things as afterthoughts. So when something hasn't been seen for a while, it's very much easier to say, you know what, I haven't even remembered this piece of research equipment existed. I guess nobody wants it. We'll just throw it away. And so often that means, again, it's tucked away in a building somewhere. And our whole job is to make sure that these assets don't end up in landfills where there's millions of dollars, even billions of dollars of these assets piling up that could be used not only internal to operations, but then to colleagues and partners and then peer organizations locally. And then again, as the network expands, as you'll see in the diagram coming up, the value can only be increased until eventually it might be useless, but there's so many more rings of potential to that item. And so we just want to get that out of landfill. So that's where Rheaply comes in. Our technology is built to help scale any buying, selling, or sharing of assets and resources internal to an organization and then external to our partner networks and partner organizations. We do this by creating what we now call our asset exchange manager. So this is our piece of technology that has taken functionality from a asset platform, an asset management platform, which some of you might have experience in, but sometimes few people do. It's a piece of technology that only a core group of people in an organization has experience with, where their whole job is to depreciate assets and then move those assets out of an organization to get ready for the procurement of new assets. So new equipment, new office infrastructure, et cetera. Our asset exchange manager combines that asset management system with an online marketplace. So an eBay, Craigslist, whatever you might think of as an online marketplace, those also have their issues. They tend to be decentralized, a little bit chaotic. The best ones are super organized, but Craigslist is Craigslist. And so ultimately we took that and combined that into an asset exchange manager, which allows for that management tracking part of the system, as well as the sharing and possibilities of connecting with colleagues and making sure that things are getting used not only internally from a wider perspective internally, but then also the greater network effect. We see that this reduces procurement costs internal to organizations. So this allows for organizations not to spend as much on new things when they actually have used things that are internal already, but just aren't being either utilized to their fullest potential or utilized at all. And they might be sitting idle in a warehouse, in a storeroom, or frankly on someone's desk, and they've just sort of ignored it. We said from there, we decrease storage costs for a lot of these organizations we work with, because you'd be surprised how many of our large organizations might have a storeroom or a warehouse filled with stuff that they're paying to store things for reasons that in the future, we don't know. They're just sitting there. They're going to sit there until someone is able to access them, but then the systems aren't available to actually access those pieces of equipment. And then our third and our final and most valuable value prop is getting rid of that unnecessary waste and diverting that waste from landfill by, again, making sure that it stays in its life cycle for as long as possible. And then we can increase its life cycle by sharing it with other organizations that might be able to utilize it. Here's our asset management system, online marketplace, and exchange manager for additional details. This can be shared upon request, of course. But this is the functionality that we've built into this. And so our whole focus is how do we build a system that's scaling the circular economy by driving user focused features. So in-app messaging, in-app transaction payments, gamification features that sort of drive activity, but also drive education to make sure that people are thinking about their space a little bit differently. They might see that thing now in the corner because they might be able to list it and potentially win some sort of item in a giveaway at the end of the month. And then that sort of gets that's the catalytic moment that gets people rethinking about the space around them. These are some of the clients that we work with, and then we continue to work with as we push forward these solutions. And then these are some of the publications that we've been a part of. So this is just me just tooting our own horn, but I don't want to run out of time because I want to jump into something else real quickly. So I think I got a couple minutes still to take somebody through this exercise, to take everybody through this exercise, and then we can of course come back to this. So from here, this is a diagram that I've mocked up because I think it best explains not only the technology that we're building, but then ultimately the network that we hope to build. So just a quick thumbs up. I think everybody can see user on the screen. Perfect. So the way we like to think about our AXM technology is again, connecting users internal to organizations. So you've got a user, you've got yourself sitting here, doing your role, performing it greatly, and then you have actually an item that you're looking to exchange. So you take your research equipment and now you can start to exchange it with your colleagues. Well, on a colleague level, this is great. But as we scale this out, this is where we can start to see that it's actually super important to notice that all these departments now can interact with one another. So now each department is exchanging between colleagues, but then as a department as a whole, internal to a whole organization, we've got an enterprise here that can actually exchange items between departments, and now there's better connectivity between these organizations and these colleagues, all administrated by an admin who's able to see what assets are flowing between users and why, and then also start to track those assets as well. As we scale this out to a community level, we start to see that enterprise and university clients and partners, as well as other government clients and partners, can start to connect with one another over the assets that are being exchanged, while also then being connected, frankly, more importantly, to the local organizations that might be needing some of these assets and can now take these assets and either pay for them at a discount to these larger organizations, pay for them outright because they still might be of some value, or in some cases, we're now starting to connect these organizations to potentially donate these assets and get rid of these assets just because they were going to throw them away. But if the local organization is willing to come and take it off their hands, well, then that makes it just all the better and make sure that it doesn't go to landfill. From here, we start to scale this out and we start to see that maybe there's other functions past just assets. And that's where we start to get into material flows as we start to think of the plastics and the paper and any types of metals that might be coming in and out of any enterprise, university, or government, that we can start to connect those in a more efficient marketplace and actually drive the economy part of the circular economy. And so we want to make sure that we can actually potentially drive a free market system in which we're actually now increasing the commodity value of a lot of the things that we once thought of as scrap, or a lot of the things that we thought of was trash might actually have value when they're bundled together and then sold or taken away by some sort of reuse enabler who's a recycler or a composter or a material hauler. And then that's when we start to further connect the dots into this sort of organic shape here, where we start to connect our government clients to any sort of emergency services on a local level. And then also start to connect in the manufacturers, those consumer brands who are looking and hungry for recycled material and need to sort of engage with these communities on a regional level, like Chicagoland or like the New York East Coast sort of region that we're starting to set up. And so I'm open to questions later, but I don't want to go much past more of my time here. But this is the idea of what we're building here at Rheaply.
So cool, Garr. It is a different view of the kind of system that I've seen Rheaply present on. So thank you. And I definitely do have some questions. I think, maybe a question I'd like to propose to other people, and maybe they can think about this as Howard's speaking, but Garr's shown us this new network idea, and what connections might this network support? Sales, donations, manufacturers seeking a product that is hard to find, or something that when it's bundled, it becomes more valuable, which is so common in recycling. How could that be applied to a community? So that just might be something to think about. And then, maybe we'll have more questions after Howard speaks. Unless somebody has a burning question for Garr right now. I don't want to stop your burn. We're okay. Cool. All right, Howard, if you want to go ahead and share your presentation, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, you're muted. All right. There you go. Oh, Howard, you're muted.
Case. All right, somebody unmuted me and then I muted myself. What I was saying was, Kim, isn't that cool what Rheaply does? I was just saying before the call, and how relevant it is to ABCD as an approach to community engagement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. I'm here virtually in my institution because we're going to talk about ABCD, community development from an asset-based community development from an institutional perspective, since many of you represent institutions. But I think, as somebody said earlier, maybe Stephanie, that it really is also very relevant to your day-to-day life and your own communities and your individual engagement with those communities. So I'm a professor at DePaul University, and I teach in a graduate program in sustainable urban development. I also teach in geography and food studies, and most of my work is around food studies and food studies research and other kinds of things. I'll let Kim introduce herself in a moment, but she and I also have different hats, and a good part of her hat is administering the ABCD Institute, which is housed at the center that I direct called the Steans Center at DePaul. Which I'm virtually in today. And on the other side of the wall, I think it's to my left on your screen, is the ABCD Institute, which we house, and we are so happy to have them. Kim will give you a bit about the history of that in a moment. So we are on the DePaul campus and housed in Faculty Hall at 2233 Kenmore, and we are a resource for communities, essentially. The Steans Center and the ABCD Institute. We're a community engagement center, the Steans Center for the entire University of DePaul, and the ABCD Institute provides us with really core fundamental approach of how we engage with communities through an assets lens. So with that, I'm going to switch over to Kim and let her talk a little bit about the history of ABCD.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Kim Hopes, and I'm the Assistant Director of ABCD Partnerships at the Steans Center. And I wanted to just give you a brief background about the ABCD Institute, which actually was founded in the late 1980s by two Northwestern professors named John McKnight and Jody Krutzman, there's a very old photo of them in action. But they were professors at the time at the Center for Urban Affairs at Northwestern. And at that time, much of the research, when John started at that center, focused on policy changes and was done with the mindset that urban neighborhoods, particularly you know, neighborhoods in the Chicago area were broken places filled with people, victimized people. The focus was all on problems in those neighborhoods. And what they realized was, if we switch to the next slide, that there was they saw a huge blind spot in looking at neighborhoods only in this way. And so what they came up with this concept of the half empty glass and the half full glass. And all of us are like this glass, where we have a half empty side and a half full side. We have our gifts, our talents, our capacities, as well as our problems and our deficits and needs. And the same thing is true with neighborhoods. But they have both assets and deficits. But the problem is we've generally been socialized to see some people as being mostly full or mostly empty. And this is true with communities and neighborhoods as well. We've been socialized through media, through different ways that people just happen to look at neighborhoods as this being a neighborhood that is full and a neighborhood that isn't full. And the truth is that it can be a very damaging way to look at communities. And if we go to the next slide, this is sort of a diagram of what it looks like if you look at a neighborhood in terms only of needs. And needs are obviously, they're an important part of when you're looking at communities and when you're trying to change communities. But it's not the only way to look at a community. And you can go ahead and switch. If we look at communities that as being only having negative attributes, it's the biggest problem with that is it's an incomplete picture, and it fuels you know, sort of everything as far as what research is done in that community, what funding is given to that community, in possibly damaging ways. And you can switch to 2 slides, Howard. So one of the problems with this way of looking at things is, firstly, it perpetuates a negative narrative of blaming the victim in the neighborhood. And then people in the neighborhood feel that they are deficient or it's their fault, or they internalize this sense of hopelessness. It also can misdirect valuable resources and ending up putting funds and time and staffing into directions that are not really going to go anywhere. And lastly, the most important thing is, if you really want to make changes in neighborhoods, you can't, and you're only assessing what is missing, you have nothing really to start with. So they decided to focus on the half full side of the glass, because they realized really nobody was focusing on that part. Everybody was looking at deficiencies. And so they started out by going to neighborhoods, and both Jody and John got a group of graduate researchers, and they went through 20 neighborhoods in 20 cities across the country, and literally went door to door, block to block, knocking on doors, saying, you know, what have you done in your neighborhood that you have seen had a positive change, no matter how large or small that change was. And they collected all these stories from actual neighbors, and people really got excited about talking about the positive things that happened in their neighborhood, and not just focusing on all the negative problems. And they collected over 3,000 stories, some using traditional organization techniques, but also found hundreds of examples of things, like small things that neighbors did in their community or on their block that made positive change. And with all that, they came back with all this research and analyzed it, and figured out that there were 6 assets. At the time they figured out 5 and added 1 later on. But there were these common things kept coming up in terms of what people used, assets being, well, Howard will go on to explain these different assets, but that there are these common ideas that kept coming up in terms of what people used that existed in their neighborhoods that was often overlooked. that really helped them make positive change. And oh, and through all this research, they ended up writing this book called Building Communities from the Inside Out. And it became like one of the best-selling community development books in the United States. And over time, their concept and ideas, which they didn't invent, I would be careful to say that they were collecting stories from people who were already doing this, and they put a name to it, a description to it, and put it in a book. And it was a workbook, not an academic book, that people in neighborhoods could use to make differences. And slowly this concept spread across the United States and across the globe. So it's very active today.
Thank you so much, Kim. So a lot of people start thinking about asset-based community development through the lens of asset mapping. And when we think about asset mapping, it's really something that communities do from the inside out, as Kim mentioned. And it begins with understanding the assets of individuals in communities and understanding their gifts and talents. And I might say that this kind of aligns well with what Garr was saying, sort of understanding the gifts and talents within any institution would be similar type of practice. And for example, some of the things that we do in the workshops on ABCD is 50 people in a room have so many gifts and talents that they don't know that each other has, right? And so we start by documenting through various exercises the gifts and talents just in that room. And it's amazing how many people, exchange cards to learn how to, bake some unique food or, something like that. So individuals have their gifts and talents that neighbors can be involved in organizing an inventory, what's called a capacity inventory, to begin to understand the nature of those gifts and talents on a block or in a full neighborhood or in a ward. And then that happens through a variety of ways that I'm not going to go into. We'd be talking about this in much more detail in a 2-day or 3-day workshop. But ultimately, it lends itself to the second asset, which is how individuals with gifts and talents organize into associations. These are unpaid groups that exist all across neighborhoods and communities in every demographic, and that people are there because they're passionate about doing work together, connecting with one another, right? And I'll get back to that word connector in a moment, which is a critical piece for ABCD. So we know these associations exist all across neighborhoods of all cities and municipalities, and how to document them and use them and connect them within community development and community engagement efforts is a strategy to build power. And I'll get back to that as well. Again, there's a variety of ways to think about building and understanding and defining and connecting associations that we talk about. But there's just a wide variety of different associations that, when well documented and inventoried within communities and connected, can become very powerful blocks to create change in communities from the inside out. And these are assets, right? Rather than looking at what's not there in a community, as Kim mentioned, these are groups that are there. Ultimately, on the outskirts of, both within and on the outskirts of neighborhoods and communities are institutions, what most of us represent. And they have a variety of roles within ABCD as an approach, which I'll talk about in more depth in a moment. But the basic institutions that exist across neighborhoods and cities and municipalities. And I'll skip this one as well, just to show you that we go into various understandings and differentiations between what an institution is and what an association is. One of the fundamental differences is associations are typically not funded or funded well, or people aren't usually paid within associations. The next asset is physical space, which I think Garr kind of referenced in some ways. as an important aspect or asset of neighborhoods, but also one, of course, of institutions that can provide supportive physical space to communities. And of course, mapping and understanding the assets of physical space and the built environment in neighborhoods is a critical way to then contribute to asset-based community development work. Exchange, how people barter, how people have small forms of economic development within neighborhoods. They're usually invisible by people entering, especially economically distressed neighborhoods. And instead of acting like there's nothing there, by beginning by documenting how exchange happens in communities is also part of it. And I would say this is, to me, I'm an anthropologist, and to me the most important one is how the stories are told that within communities that help build meaning and transfer understanding of what a community is an extremely important asset in framing sort of the culture of neighborhoods, culture of communities, the culture of institutions. And so when we come together with these assets, what we begin to see is not a neighborhood deficits map, but an asset mapping project where individuals are at the center with their gifts and talents. They form associations with power to get together and connect with one another. And they then can demand more resources because they have more power. And they can also work logistically to get support from local institutions and other forms of institutional support. So an ABCD approach has a number of great features to it that also has a number of great values that I'll let Kim talk about as we finish up here.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so one of the first values about ABCD is it values it's starting small, and really ABCD was designed to work on neighborhood by block, but it values small grassroots resident-driven approaches that use stories as the basis for learning, sharing, and acting for change. And then the next, if you can switch this, are we switched? Why am I not seeing it? The next value is to build relationships for mutual support. So ABCD believes that relationships are the core of flourishing communities. Relationships create trust and activate gifts and power. And then the third value is to nurture citizen-led action. ABCD defines a citizen, and this is important, as an actively contributing member to the well-being of their community. The word has been hijacked obviously lately, and so there is some discussion, but we're trying to decide whether we want to maintain the integrity of the actual meaning of the word. But the point is, when citizens act together, they demonstrate their own power and bring about positive change. And ABCD values everybody's voice and contribution. The next is working for equity and justice. And ABCD fosters a world where all people thrive. It helps people use their gifts to work in their communities to disrupt systematic oppression and regenerate power in new and creative ways. The belief in possibility. ABCD is rooted in hope. And people in communities, even in extreme situations, can use their gifts to imagine ways to create change and have the power to direct that change. And then also an important value is to lead by stepping back. And this is often takes place in an institutional setting too. So ABCD shines a light on residents' power to contribute and make decisions in their communities. And the work of institutions is to lead by stepping back, to support residents' efforts rather than lead those efforts, and to create and implement the changes they seek for their communities. And lastly, include everyone. ABC does not just invite people to the table, but builds a new table where everybody has a true place. So it's not just making decisions and then inviting people to see what they think of those decisions, but really starting with the people who live in communities at the table. So ABCD celebrates and values diversity, and we are better when more diverse voices are present in shaping who we are and how we practice ABCD.
Thanks so much, Kim. And we're going to finish up here by saying that this is a micro version of a 2 or 3 day workshop, usually done in person with a maximum of 50 people in the room, as I said. We now do those workshops online virtually as well. And people come from across the world to take the workshops. There are ABCD practitioners across the world. And there are many sort of websites and blogs and so forth that represent that we can provide you with more information on. And also many resources at the ABCD Institute website, which Kim can drop in the chat if you wouldn't mind, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were to go a little bit deeper with more time, we would talk about what asset mapping means from the standpoint of using this basic framework and the values that are underlying it in communities and working with communities. But we especially would go into, with all you, a deeper understanding of what it means to take a position as an institution or representative of an institution working in communities. And that's exactly what we do at the Steans Center at DePaul with faculty and students across the university. So I'm not going to go into the asset mapping section here, but just to give you a sense, the main aspect of asset mapping is connecting the 6 assets. And that in itself is like a 2-hour workshop. So I would welcome you to think about joining us, to think about what being a connector means. Not everyone's a connector, by the way, but there are many connectors, and you know who they are because they connect you with everyone. By the way, I think Stephanie's a connector, just by you know, as a side note. Let me skip to this last slide to say that institutions have a really important role, even though it's on the margins of ABCD as an approach. They have a really important role in doing community development. I think this also meshes really interestingly with Garr's presentation, in that institutions have many resources that they can support community development as a process. First and foremost, they can be conveners. They can host educational opportunities that convene people. They can provide pro bono or low-cost technical assistance. They can organize and fund community service and volunteer opportunities. They can provide physical space, as we've said. Our center and our university provides physical space to just about any community partner that has an interest. They can provide tools, equipment, and services. We know institutions provide fiscal management for small associations that get a grant that aren't a 501c3, those neighborhood associations, right? They can connect communities to other institutions, which is one of the really important aspects of being an institutional person, is to know other institutions, be able to connect community members to those institutions. And then lastly, 2 of the most important ones, of course, are they can fund community initiatives, especially in the communities around them, and support fundraising as an asset. If I had more time, I'd go into some of the ways that we do that at DePaul in more depth. Here's a parent initiative across 12 schools, public and Catholic and early education, where we're bringing community members together, parents from all those schools, to share commonalities around the issues and to come up with initiatives that they would like to work on in their neighborhoods, but across school boundaries, right? And so this is another initiative we've been working on for about 6 years, where we're bringing faith-based leaders together to understand how to better work with veterans in their communities, how to be more accessible to veterans and provide more support, not necessarily religious or faith-based support, but other forms of support, how to engage with them in a productive way, utilizing veterans as the trainers. And so, utilizing the talents and skills of veterans in that community as the trainers. So I'm going to end with that, and we can go into questions at some point when you're ready, Stephanie.
Yeah, feverishly taking notes. I feel like I just went to school, and I thank you guys so much. I know that, I knew when I asked Howard to do this that we were going to be learning something that they teach in a very methodic and slower pace than what we asked. But, if anything, maybe this information has inspired you to think differently about the community immediately surrounding the place where you're working, or the different communities that you serve through the work that you do. And so many of you honestly know so much more about this than me, given the hands-on work you're doing. I do have a few questions, but I'd like to just first open it up to everybody. And you can begin by asking anything to Howard or Kim, or maybe some of you have thought about the image that Garr put up there of the network. And you've got people sitting in a pod in an office back in the day, and then you've got those different departments together where there's an administrator. And since I just saw Mark's face, I'm picturing the merchandise mart. And let's say then there's all these floors where there's all these different pods, and maybe those administrators look to someone like Mark. And then how does the mart connect to DePaul and Northwestern? And maybe I don't need to go on, but how does that all link to the way in which we could use that network as an asset, those individuals as assets, and then what materials move through those streams? Because we're all connected through the different ways that Howard and Garr and Kim presented. So I promised to stop talking.
Well, and I just think, to Howard's point too, I often do not think about the knowledge that flows through those streams as well, and the connections, and piecing together the answers that each one of us has that can come to a greater picture. So absolutely, I love that, Howard.
So I'll begin by asking, just since no one's jumping in, Howard, if there's any examples of institutions, I know that there are in Chicago, that are part of ABCD, organizations that maybe link to the community, an organization similar to the ones that are represented here today. And you're muted.
I know, thanks. And I should also let Kim respond to that, because she's so deeply engaged with different communities working on this. Probably one of our top people right now that I just got off a call that Stephanie, about, is Ray Thompson over at the Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation, who's an extremely networked individual who's an ABCD faculty member, Institute. So we have 50-some faculty members of the ABCD Institute. They're not university faculty, they're faculty of the Institute. And Ray is one of them, and has been for many years, Kim, right? I got off the call just with him recently because the Restaurant Opportunity Center needs children's masks for restaurant workers, for their kids. And Ray is connected now to PPE across the city, and is just taking in PPE like crazy. And so we're making connections with people like him, because he is working and nurturing that organization that he works for through an ABCD model that I think is really incredibly important. Kim, did you have any examples that you want to share?
I think I would share Terry Bergdahl and Seva Gandhi at the they're at the Institute for
Cultural Affairs, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Cultural Affairs, and their Accelerate 77 work, where they were connecting, people in neighborhoods across Chicago who are doing sustainability work, and discovering, having them come to discovering what they're doing, just your average citizen in neighborhoods, and then having them come together at a fair and sharing all of their information, not just with the general public, but with each other. And that was a very asset-based way of working.
Yeah, and Seva is also an ABCD faculty member. And another person who might come into your worldview is Karen Lehman, another ABCD faculty member who does work supporting fundraising for food systems initiatives across the region, connected to so many different people. Whenever I talk to Karen, because I'm involved in food systems work, and I need to know about some aspect of it, she knows where to direct me. She's a connector. And so,
I want to
yeah.
pause you, Howard, because I feel like having some context on my own, I want to give people a little bit of context around these three great examples, because you know, the Greater Album Gresham Development Corps, when the PPE needs were beginning to present themselves across Chicago area with COVID, and the rapid response work that, you know, I can't say enough, shouting out to Chicago Food Policy Action Council. Marley's on the line. Convening began, I think it was 28 weeks ago, and that's why I've seen Howard's face every week for months, and thankfully. And what, you know, they recognized that they had a way to do good, and that's the reason why they're taking in PPE and distributing it. They saw success of, you know, they saw a need and addressed it, and then recognized that they could do more good, take that and expand it. This is my perspective, Howard, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But
no, it's great. And I would mention one other example very quickly is another former staff member of our center and major connector is Anton Seals at Grow Greater Englewood, who is taught ABCD workshops at the Egan office, which is a part of our center. And really, it was a fundamental person behind bringing people together to document the assets of Englewood, to build a plan for transformation that now is, you know, definitely seeing some action from funders and supporters, right? But it was grassroots developed through community members, recognizing their assets.
yeah, and actually both SEVA, the Institute for Cultural Affairs, the network that Kim mentioned is called the Chicago Sustainability Leadership Network. And I'm, you know, connected to them or contacted by mistake even, because CSTF has a similar name. You know, what we represent are kind of the large scale entities involved in this, and I think the grassroots is more reflected in the work that SEVA, you know, sort of discovered and convenes around. But, you know, I would be open and interested in hearing everyone's thoughts on ways that CSTF might see value as organizations, or, you know, as a group that we are, to connect more deeply with them. So I wanted to bring that up. And then also, before you can answer me, but also they were tapped by the city of Chicago when the Department of Streets and Sanitation recognized really high contamination rates in our blue carts, which clearly is an ongoing issue. Don't get Carter started. Just kidding, Carter. But the way to improve the city's recycling program was, one of the ways was to identify and target some neighborhoods that had high contamination rates or low engagement rates. There was nothing in the bin, or it was highly contaminated. And they selected some neighborhoods. And the way they did that was hold meetings, and they tapped the Chicago Sustainability Leadership Network to hold some, I'm not going to call them town halls, but community meetings to, you know, to basically, you know, through that research project. I don't know enough to speak to it beyond that, but Brightbeat was involved in some of the audits, the waste audits, to see the results of education campaigns that happened in those designated neighborhoods. So I see that, and then, you know, Anton Seals is a member, I don't want to butcher the name of the task force, but he has been recently placed on a task force to support equity in response to COVID. So I appreciate it, and I want you guys to appreciate that the city recognizes the value of ABCD as represented by those examples that I just mentioned. And I'll go on to say that Fresh Taste, which is, Karen is the executive director of Fresh Taste, and they've worked with, and she's been the program director on, and again, I hope I have that role exactly right, of distributing funds for rapid response to COVID in the food system. The Chicagoland food system, it's not called the Relief Fund, I'll share a link, has done already 2 rounds of funding to support initiatives. I think some in Englewood, I think some across the city, and even further out, really, really strong programs to build resilience and, you know, immediately deal with response. Thank you guys, and build resilience in the food system. So the work that Karen's doing is, you know, huge scale. So I just can't thank enough Howard and Kim for sharing these examples. And, you know, I'd love to hear if anyone has questions and thoughts about ways that either you can get involved as individuals or organizations, or just, you know, questions about this information. I'm muting myself. All right, I'm not going to pressure people for questions unless someone just spoke up. Okay, thank you guys so much. So we're going to keep talking here, and you know what we generally do after we have these. Laurel, if you want to speak up, you can unmute yourself before you go. Nice try. I don't want to read your message.
Yes, I'm sorry, guys. I do have to hop off for another call at 4. So I just finished typing my update to Stephanie, but I will read it off for everybody. Hi, I'm Laurel Krukey from the Illinois Green Alliance. First of all, Garr, Howard, Kim, thank you guys so much. I thought it was really interesting. I have also lots of notes that I need to process through, lots of really good ideas to think about. The one update I wanted to share for Illinois Green is that we just launched our Illinois Green Schools project. I think folks on this call might be interested in hearing more about that and looking more into that. This fall, we're offering a lot of schools-based webinars about sustainability in schools. And then we are looking for schools to participate and then mentors to work with the schools. We'll start that kind of recruitment later this fall, winter, and into the spring. Of course, this is all changing with the COVID situation, but Stephanie just put our website in the chat. So feel free to look around, let me know if you have any questions about it, and I can put you in touch with my colleagues as well. But thank you guys so much. Great call today. I'm sorry I have to leave, but I look forward to your email, Stephanie, with everybody else's updates. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Laurel.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to a couple questions that I had, and I'll just consider that part of my member update. So when we're talking about asset mapping, it's just weirdly something I'm really into, because I just think it's so clear and obvious oftentimes that the right thing is there. Someone has something that someone else needs. We've found it at, I could just give a bunch of examples, but I'm wondering if when it comes to the asset mapping, Howard, and you are working on, and Kim, and you're working on building that inventory, or when a community builds that inventory, is it shared? You know, is that information utilized outside of that community? You know, if they've identified their assets and maybe there are more, there's a surplus, you know, is there an ABCD approach to sharing outside of your circle?
Kim, you could probably respond to that as well. There are so many examples of ABCD across the world, in every continent, maybe with the exception of Antarctica. Probably somebody doing something there too. But you know, we're on calls like regularly with people from, you know, Africa and Asia and you know, Europe, with examples of how they're sharing of different ways that ABCD is applied. It's a tool for internal community development primarily. But I think there's aspects of it that institutional people can definitely grasp and utilize within their own institutional settings, and do the kind of asset mapping that you were referring to. Kim, did you want to talk about the sharing aspect? There's a lot of resources on that.
Yeah, sure. So as far as the institution, you can map, like Howard said, the assets in your institution and use this method. You can apply the ABCD methodology to so many different disciplines. So it certainly can be applied within institutions, and then a framework for how institutions can see how they are involved directly with communities, like how the local institutions are being assets, how they can best be assets in their own communities. And in terms of the ABCD can be applied, people in healthcare are using ABCD, people in fields of education, faith-based fields, really all sorts of fields it can be applied to.
Thank you. Thank you. And sometimes I feel like I might sound ignorant with my question, but what you said makes sense.
I'll give you a quick example, Stephanie. There was a group of gardeners on the Southwest side back in the last decade, around 2006 or 7. They wanted a map of community gardens in their neighborhood, but they wanted it across Little Village, North Lawndale, and Bridgeport, because they wanted to understand how to meet others beyond their neighborhood boundaries. And the roots of that concept really went in to feed what today is the Chicago Urban Agriculture Mapping Project, which is live, quamp.org, which involved 10 organizations at one point getting together to talk about it. So the sharing of asset mapping beyond one's neighborhood, I think, is a way to build power and connections. And part of, like, I think of Garr's sort of map, flow charts. And I think that's what, as things build and people are more connected, there's more power in the movements that are using ABCD.
Thank you. I agree, and I just feel like there's been so many examples of, the logistics getting in the way. Okay, so these are great concepts, but when it comes time to apply it, if you're talking about food, there's a shelf life associated with especially produce or something that's fresh or something that's prepared and hot, and it's a logistics question. Yes, of course, there's hungry people who would like the food left over from the convention or from the party or the concert, but how do we get it there and in that time frame, and where are they and how do we connect with them? And so technology, be it something like that Rheaply's designing for more of a finite or a fixed network of people, to the kind of apps that the Wasted Food Action Alliance has bounced around and talked about and researched continuously to really figure out how we can connect not only, existing food with folks who need it, but then also assets like cold storage, assets like refrigerator trucks, and then just storage opens up a whole example of, needs that if you can bale something, it's obviously cheaper and more likely to be recycled. But the transportation requires 20 bales, to fit in a container, because that's what maybe the reprocessor needs. So when we're talking about transportation and, again, all these different assets, I'm thinking about what you've all shared and how it could be applicable to a plastics recycling challenge, for example, and just kind of thinking out loud if that gets any of you moving towards an idea that would be useful across our institutions.
I totally agree, Steph, and I appreciate some of the examples that have been given. What would really be helpful is to get like a further inventory of other types of projects that have occurred for us to really see how some of our organizations might fit within this framework.
I wonder if there's, you know, I'm not saying that maybe Kim has shared a couple links in the chat that I haven't been able to read through yet, but I know that the ABCD Institute has lots of resources on there. I don't know, before I move on, Kim, do you want to speak to what type of inventory maybe Anthony or we could access there?
Sure. I would start, I can probably come up with some more examples that if I send them to Stephanie, if you could send out to people.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first resources I would go to is our website, which is really a repository of publications and videos. And it's ABC, it's in the chat right now, but there are sections there that have stories about different ways that ABC has been used. A lot of, I put something else in the chat that is specifically focuses on institutions and how institutions can use their assets. But the website would be the first place to go. The other place I would like to recommend is our online community of practice, which is called ABCD in Action. And that's a place, there's over 2,500 members. So it's free to become a member. We just ask people to sign up to avoid spammers. But there's, it's a great resource in terms of just posing questions. There's people on there who use ABCD in all different aspects and not just in the US, but across the world. And it's a place where you can start discussions or pose questions. So you're reaching a huge population of people who are both ABCD faculty and people who are using ABCD in their daily work. And so that's another great resource I would point to.
Yeah, and now there's also these conferences, because of COVID, there's all these virtual conferences. In June, we had one, was 48-hour long conference across the entire world with several thousand participants, and people presenting on their models of how they apply ABCD in different places, in different languages, with different cultural viewpoints. And I think that you don't have to dig too far by putting asset-based community development and the topic that you're interested in, like disabilities. And Kim could tell you 10 people that would help you with that, or issues around sort of environmental contamination. There's a slew of people working on those issues through an asset-based community development framework. And so it really, you don't have to dig too far, but we as an institute are also here to help and support people and guide them to those examples and connect you to the people who are working on them.
I'm going to put my email in here too.
I should say we've had some really interesting and also very challenging examples of ABCD in Chicago, including Anton Seals, who when he was working for us was trying to do ABCD with the Chicago Police Department, which if anybody knows Anton here, he can, if you get him on the side, he can tell you some stories about.
All right, that's something to think about or reach out to him about in the future. I don't want to stop this conversation, but I do want to invite everybody to speak up and share their own updates. And I don't normally like to put people on the spot, but it seems like around this time, you know, kids' school days might be starting to end and some people have to start dropping out. So those of you like Julie, Cal, I don't even know, you know what, Julie, I don't even know the exactly right way to pronounce your last name because I never say it out loud. But what's going on with you? How's Northwestern?
Hi. Northwestern is fine. It's Kay Helene.
Kay Helene, thank you.
Yeah, it's, you know, just navigating the strangeness and students returning to school and football coming back. And so
Wow.
probably similar to everybody else, trying to figure out how to do engagement when you're remote is interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like a similar challenge to a lot of us. I know that Loyola has been doing a lot of online kind of conferences. Is there anything that we should know about at Northwestern that's, you know, sort of resources being put out there or communication around sustainability?
You know, we're continuing to communicate. We just put out one of our newsletters today. And so we're reaching out and doing all the virtual events that were organized for our new student orientation, as strange as that was with students not on campus. And there is the Midwest Climate, what's it called? Midwest Climate Summit. I'll put the link in here. Coming up that it's mostly institutions of higher ed being organized by some local folks. And I'll put the link in the chat box. And yeah, most of the other programming we're doing virtually is, you know, really targeted at our students and our faculty and staff.
Yeah, good to know.
But I'll dump this link in shortly as soon as I locate it.
Thank you. And that reminds me, I don't know that there's a lot of cities represented, but I know a lot of us work with cities, you know, not just Chicago. And the National Resource Defense Council put out information today regarding the Great Lakes region having, let me make sure that I say it exactly right here. The Food Matters is what they call it. It's my brother lives in Orlando, and it's funny because he sent me a text saying, "You're going to be so excited. The Food Matters project is coming to Orlando," which is great. They're selecting cities region by region around the country, the National Resource Defense Council. And these regional initiatives are doing large-scale food waste efforts on a regional level. So I'll put in the chat the information to sign up for October 15th. There's going to be an informational session. And I would just encourage anyone who knows of a municipality that might be interested in this, that's the call to learn more. And everyone who registers for that call will receive an application. So really exciting in terms of food waste to have some kind of national spotlight on our region and hopefully our cities around here.
Just to clarify, they are only looking at cities. Like there has to be a population, you know, of maybe at least 200,000 people, I believe. That's one of the criteria.
Okay, good to know. 200,000.
Yeah, it's like 150 to 200, but we'll learn more on the webinar next week for sure.
Thank you, Julie. Julie, any updates you'd like to share from the EPA?
I have one update, and it's on some work that I have not been a part of, but my colleagues have, but it's definitely worth sharing here. We are currently taking comments on the draft national recycling strategy. And the strategy has been in development for the last couple of years now. And what it does is it's identifying objectives and actions that we all need to take to create a stronger, more resilient recycling system, especially since we've been under the China sword. Comments are accepted until next Friday, October 2nd at 10:59 p.m. Central Time. And I'll share a link to the page where, which will link you to the federal FRN, the Federal Register Notice, where you can submit comments. And you can read the strategy. And I had one more quick update related to food. A lot of my work is in measurement, and we recently released a food waste measurement methodology scoping memo. And that will become part of our annual facts and figures report. But what the scoping memo has done is expanded to look at the full spectrum of methods that are used in managing food as a waste. So originally it only included like composting, anaerobic digestion, and like incineration and landfilling. And we expanded it beyond that. There are 6 additional methods. And I can actually, here, let me pull up this list here. We've added animal feed, bio-based materials such as rendering fats, oils, and greases to like make makeup or whatever. For example, we've added co-digestion, donation, land application, and sewer wastewater treatment. So if anyone's looking for numbers or data to support a presentation or something, let me know and I can connect you to the report. I'll connect it in the chat as well.
Thank you.
And that's it.
And I have to say that the Food Recovery Challenge calls that I think you helped really inspire, these multi-regional calls, have been great to hear success stories and ideas around the country. So thank you for that.
That's good. You know, the Food Too Good to Waste calls are national. And I don't know if you've been on any of those, but those have really taken off, especially since quarantine and COVID. So if you're interested in hearing from people beyond regions 5, 7, and 8, it's a whole slew of information. And we actually have a Google Docs page. Can't even believe that we've been allowed to do that. But we have a Google Docs page full of resources from across the country. A lot of it is on food waste reduction, but you know, we've obviously have chats beyond that.
Nice. We love dogs and kids. Would we be able to share that resource on the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition website or the Wasted Food Action Alliance websites?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Cool.
I'll share that with you.
Thank you.
I'm getting some loving.
Julie, if you send me that information, I'd be happy to put it on both websites. It's Jen Nelson.
Okay, I can do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to let everybody speak up, or I'm going to let everybody go early. It's usually the opposite, trying to kick you guys off so I can go take a walk, but everyone seems quiet today.
This is Jen Nelson from 7 Generations Ahead and the Wasted Food Action Alliance, and I put in the chat information about our town hall that we're hosting, virtual town hall next Tuesday, looking at how to get your community composting. I know we've had discussions about composting as part of the Chicago Sustainability Task Force, and I know composting in Chicago is going to be a much bigger discussion than will be handled in this town hall. But please consider joining. We're going to be learning from communities that have successfully launched programs and some of the ways in which they have engaged leadership in those conversations, engaged residents in participating. So it's free. The link to sign up is in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Aaron, you're not allowed to put that much into the chat and not speak up.
Hi, everybody. I had some stuff going on here, so I had to drop off for a second. But I think, Steph, you were referring to some of the challenges of having your kids at home. But yeah, I put some things in there. You know, some things that probably most universities and others that are dealing with education are dealing with. But I guess our big news for folks that are familiar with Loyola is our Institute of Environmental Sustainability has now been officially designated a school. So within the university structure, that's a big deal. We just actually got it was voted by our board of trustees 2 weeks ago, but it was just publicly announced by our president today. So, but I shared some other things. Some folks might be interested sharing into your network some of our sustainability graduate programs, both in the School of Environmental Sustainability and in our programs that are in our business school. There's a lot of fun things. New fun developments there for sort of purpose-driven business. But yeah, that's all. I mean, there's always lots of other things going on with events and whatnot. I think I will put a link in here in the chat. I'm doing a lunchtime talk next Wednesday, so noon to 1, on how to do a greenhouse gas inventory. So for folks that are thinking about maybe doing that for your organization, it'll be a pretty quick one. Can't go into too much detail. Obviously, for folks that have done it, know that it gets pretty pretty detail focused, but I'll be using, of course, Loyola as an example, but talk at a higher level about what goes into scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions for organizations. So I'll send the link on how to participate in that. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you again. When I've been able to attend some of the speaker series that you guys have had, I've really been interested and, came away with notes on just different ways of looking at things. I feel like I'm getting free college, but from knowing all you guys. So thank you very much. But I appreciate the topics that Loyola's been covering, and really, sustainability matters, and anti-racism. These notes that you've put in here, I think if you guys look into it, you might find something inspiring, even going back to the archives. So thanks. Good job. Okay, Brophy. Or Anthony, you can talk. Once John starts, he doesn't stop.
So Carter brought it up. Thank you all for attending the Greentown Conference this week. Just a reminder that we have 2 more events coming up. So on Monday, the 28th, we will be showing the Guardians movie. It's the movie's about monarch butterflies and a whole bunch of other issues, and it's really, really powerful. So that movie will be playing at 6:30 on Monday, and then the conference, the final conference, I think will be on the 30th. And so registration is still live, so you can still register for the last 2 days of the conference if you are interested. Thank you.
Thank you. And the movie about turtles was pretty cool. The break during Greentown was like, and someone referred to it as sex ed, turtle sex ed. I was like, wow, we didn't have to go there. But there's so many different kinds of turtles. And it was really interesting. And I'm doing this because you never thought that they had so much difference on the, under their underside and whatever you call their feet, flaps. I don't know what they are. It was awesome.
We have another video coming up on the 30th, a new video as well. We're gonna take you on our Saguaro Canyon. We're gonna do a tour of that. It's just a short little video, but it has some really powerful information that we really haven't talked about in a national platform like this. So there's another video coming up too.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to just mention right now, before I forget, that we do have a couple spots open for tomorrow's canoe trip. We are using canoes, not kayaks. I'm sorry, Ian. They are super long, 16 feet. So we will be socially distanced from the other people in our boat. My daughter will be there, but she will not be paddling. And so, yeah, if anyone wanted to participate, we're meeting at the boathouse at Clark Park. And it'll be about an hour and a half on the Chicago River, guided. And Carter, I think, have you actually had Jeff the guide before? I think you said that it's educational, informative, as well as fun.
Yeah, so Jeff is a fellow tree keeper, and he's been with this operation, I think he said, for like 15 years. So he's really good. He definitely knows what he's doing.
So if you're interested, tell me, but otherwise we'll get back to you guys with some photos and stories of the fun that we have, and we'll miss you if you're not.
Steph, what time is it?
We're meeting at 10. We're probably going to go off about 10:30, and we have a hard stop at 1. Between 12:30 and 1, we should be done.
Well, my daughter will be disappointed then because it's during school.
Sorry.
Next time.
Yeah. All right. Paloma, is there anything you want us to know about going on with the Illinois Environmental Council? If you're able.
Hey. We don't have too much going on right now. We do have a gala happening this Friday night, which is kind of what we are entirely focused on right now. The tickets start at free, and they are at illenviro.org/gala. And that is pretty much where our whole entire staff has been this whole past few weeks. So I'll drop a link in there.
Thank you. Thank you. And anyone who might be interested, you know, the IEC convened a group around plastics. And that was something that was really important to this group leading up to what we thought was going to be an Earth Day effort, but obviously things changed. And so a lot of the universities and the initiatives that we had discussed at our January meeting really didn't end up coming to fruition. But IEC convened a group, and Carter attends some of the calls that I've been on as well. Outreach was sent to the governor because the executive order specifying, you know, all these different precautions and details around safety at some point may have made it unclear that you can or cannot bring reusable bags to a grocery store. And there's been a lot of interest in clarifying that so that your local grocery store or that a national grocery store chain isn't pushing down requiring the use of plastic bags. So that letter was sent to the governor. As of last I heard, the executive order has been extended to a date in October. So nothing's changed on that, but you can still bring your bag. If anyone on this call hasn't done it already, I'm telling you that you shouldn't have a problem. Who am I? But if you go with your bag, you'll have to bag your own stuff. But there's been very few examples in the last month or so of anyone saying that they've had pushback on that. And the next step in that effort that IEC is leading, I'm involved in, and what we're doing is drafting a letter that will go to the grocery stores so that they are aware of the benefits of they can save money by allowing people to bring their own bags. This is a drop in the bucket for the whole waste conversation, but we need to move our culture towards reuse, and this is simply one of those ways to do it. So just a little kind of IEC related note, and thanks, Paloma, to all you guys have done to help move those forward.
Maybe the task force could make a card like the anti-maskers use to say like, hey, I don't have to wear a mask. It's like, hey, we have our bag thing, the task force, it's official, you know, it's laminated.
Or we could print it on our masks.
Even better, I love it.
Nice. Megan, do you or Kevin, I don't know if Kevin is still here, want to speak to the work that you're doing with the city? I think a lot of us, prior to it being announced, I don't even know if it's announced officially, you know, we're sort of aware of the, not waste characterization, but I'll let you explain. But we've been excited about this work coming, so we'd love to hear about it if you're able.
Sure. Not officially announced because we're still working within briefing aldermen and connecting with internal city stakeholders, but I can tell you that we are starting to move into some of the external stakeholder phase, so I'll definitely want to reach out to several people here. We're partnering with the mayor's office for the city of Chicago to develop a waste strategy for the city, so it won't really be a replica of the most recent characterization study, or we also worked on Cook County for their solid waste management plan. It's got slightly different goals than a document like that, but we're looking to review policies and develop strategies to look at the waste stream more holistically and think about different materials managements, as well as how this different city departments work together instead of exclusively focusing on streets and sanitation. So we're going to be looking at contracts and infrastructure and making recommendations on how to improve and make ambitious goals for improving waste management and material recovery and diversion for the city of Chicago. So that's kind of just getting started, and definitely feel free to reach out to me. I'm Megan from Delta Institute, and if anyone has any questions or wants to be involved in that, and we'll also be probably reaching out to you as well. And then on a side note for other Delta things, I was just putting some links in the chat. Our associate board puts on an event called Boost every year where it's a pitch contest for environmental-based social entrepreneurs for seed funding. It's always a fun event. It's going to be virtual this year, and applications are open until the 5th if anyone knows anyone who would be interested. And thanks for letting me crash this meeting.
Oh no, glad you were given a backstage pass. And Boost, wasn't Block Bins, weren't they were they a winner
Yes.
last year or?
Yes. They received, I believe the funding level was $5,000 last year. So, it's not a huge amount, but if you are just getting started, it can be a great kind of early funding for organizations like Blockbin, and you can go and see all the past winners who are all doing very cool things.
Yeah. No, that's great. And, for Block Bin to be allowed to have compost bins sitting in the alley would have been enough, because they've won that award and maybe had more credibility. I have to think it was helpful because a lot of us did not know early on, like, should we recommend Block Bin? Is it legal? Like, do they have a permit? We don't know. And not that I would ever have said that out loud, but you do want to make sure. Actually, I did.
Sure, and I'll just add to, since you mentioned the backstage pass, Chris Sove from the city and Streets and Sanitation was the one who asked me to come to this meeting today. So I just want to say that he's definitely very supportive of this group, and I wanted to make sure that we were connecting with you.
Thank you, and thank you for saying that. The city from, Chris was how when we re-engaged this group together, he from the very beginning has been supportive and busy and not always here, but here in spirit and here in person kind of through you. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure, thank you.
Marta, I saw a note from you. Did you want to mention anything about what the Product Stewardship Alliance is doing, if there's anything Illinois-based or just, national initiatives that we should know about? If you're still with us. I'm looking back. She said that she's the chair of the Illinois Product Stewardship Alliance and on the board of the Illinois Recycling Association. So just for those who didn't scroll through in the chat, I wanted to shout out back to Marta, who also I think has been on those plastic calls with the IEC as well. Okay. I'll let you guys know really briefly that after the compostable plastics forum that really grew out of a conversation that we all had in April when Carter had originally invited us to do a lunch and learn because a lot of people were interested after speaking about composting in learning more and discussing it more. Alex, you were one of the, you and Brianna from Farmer's Fridge were like, we need to do this. This is important. So really, it was your excitement and enthusiasm that got that first one going in April. In August, we did the Compostable Plastics Forum, and what it's looking like now. So we wrapped that up with a call out to register for a brainstorming session. And have since had some interactions with different industry stakeholders who really feel that this is important. You can imagine that the composting industry, if we're going to be throwing potentially either contaminants or harder to break down items into their piles, they want to be involved in the conversation. All the makers of the compostable materials, food service packaging, they want to be a part of the conversation. But then there's broader goals of, and I'm speaking specifically to those who we've been in touch with and who are going to be involved in this next call, in makers of retail, like candy products or retail products, food products, who are looking at their own packaging. We've got folks from Minnesota, St. Louis, Calgary, Vancouver. And then mostly there's about 20 people signed up, mostly Chicago based with about maybe 5 or 7 from outside of this area. But there's national interest in talking sincerely about a universally accepted set of standards for compost facilities. And this has kind of piqued that interest once again. So I don't want to bore all of you who aren't really compost focused folks, but I'll just let you know that I think that just like the NRDC is looking at this region and picking cities that might be a focus for food waste efforts that are being done widely. I think that work on compostable plastics and really the unification and the bringing together of compost facilities in our region to draw some guidelines that all of their customers can follow in terms of what products are accepted and the standardization of that. Like, there's national interest and hopefully funding to help make this happen in the Chicago region. So I thank all of you guys for really drumming up the excitement around it that's leading to hopefully some bigger plans and projects that I'll share with you as I can.
Hey, Stephanie, I just wanted to apologize. My computer crashed when I hit unmute.
I apologize that that happened.
I didn't. I know you were trying to ask me to speak up, and I missed it because I unmuted and it crashed, and I logged back in.
Okay.
So,
if you wanted to share anything in regards to the Product Stewardship Alliance, I wanted to give you that opportunity.
well, the Illinois Product Stewardship Council is actually a chapter of the Product Stewardship Institute. And if you were to look that up, they do a lot of dynamic things. And that was kind of the reason Stephanie invited me today, although this is really cool, to facilitate a circular economy through extended producer responsibility. So as you're talking about packaging, the Illinois chapter is not involved with anything, but on a national level, there is talk amongst a number of states and trying to negotiate with the different packaging folks to be responsible for what they're making and having actual recycling for it and increasing the recycled content of what it is they produce. So that has been an ongoing over a year and a half. I tune into some of their meetings, and they have an entire list of criteria that they're trying to negotiate now to see happen. I don't know exactly how that will pan out, but that is an effort. On a statewide basis, the states will take things upon themselves to try to pass legislation. So our electronics law that we have here in Illinois that makes electronics manufacturers responsible, that's something that we were heavily involved in, and we looked at other state laws, and we're considered to have one of the best ones right now. And we're working on pharmaceuticals. We're working on paint for next year legislation to make sure that latex paint gets recycled. And we're even talking to the manufacturers about making their paint cans more recycled content and recyclable, that kind of stuff. So anyway, thank you so much. I really like what was being discussed today.
No, thank you. Thank you. And I just saw in the chat that Alex had a question. So I'm going to put in the chat to everybody the tiny URL. If you wanted to be a part of that next call, it's the compost brainstorm. And I think that it'll be, I have a call Monday, and after that call, we're going to send out a doodle, and it'll be at the latest, the early part of the week after that. So like by August 6th or 7th, I'm sorry, I keep saying that, October 6th or 7th is when that call will happen, then or earlier, because we're really trying to move ahead and link this to someone who's got a meeting coming up, so.
I just wanted to add one quick compost thing because that's also my world in a related sense. We spent a couple of years studying the relationship between community gardens and composting. And from an asset-based framework, we think of community gardeners as perhaps providing the foundation for neighborhood composting systems because of the possibilities for obvious reuse in neighborhoods of compost. I was looking for a way to share a file. We have a report that we finished on that would maybe, I think, Stephanie, you have that report that you could share with folks?
Sure.
Yeah, and really thinking through what perhaps municipal county investment in neighborhood-based composters, especially those who are growers, could mean in sort of collective composting processes. So anyways, just wanted to add that piece.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. And I don't know if if many of you on the call are aware that the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County was recently awarded a USDA grant, and it's community composting and composting and community gardens, circular economy, and U of I Extension, ISTC is involved. April's going to be on the project. I'm so excited. And the Lake County Forest Preserve is going to be land applying the food amended compost that comes from the organics recycling that takes place through expanded outreach to restaurants, institutions, and commercial generators, as well as increased marketing of the existing residential programs that just don't have as much, and they've got much more capacity than is currently being used in these, they call them ride-along programs. So there's a lot of these yard waste programs where you can put the food in and you're not being charged for this as a resident, but there just needs to be more education around it. So thank you, Carter, for sharing that. But I wanted to tell you that that's happening, and I hope that some of the best practices, Howard, or suggestions that you shared would be in there. Carter, is that a link to Howard's paper or another paper, just to make sure I'm clear?
That's a link that Shantanu co-authored last year, and it's a capacity study of Chicago and how much we could do for composting just using backyards and parks and things like that.
Yes. I feel like, Howard, were you a part of that one too?
No, but I read it when I was publishing our report. It may be cited. I can't remember.
Yeah. It was presented on the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition on a call, and it's really good. Aaron's making me want a beer. Aaron, I don't know if you're doing that on purpose or if you and Ian are cheersing each other. Thank you. So I'm glad that there's a lot of composting fans out there. And on the community gardening side, it's interesting. I always think about that also in the fall when the seasons change. Is there, when talking about assets, are there indoor means to keep that going? I don't know. Is there a sort of off-season community gardening activity or network or space that people use? Or should we
for composting?
No, for actually growing.
Like,
there are a lot of season extension sort of tools that gardeners are using across the city. It's the most expensive aspect of running a community garden, though, to buy and purchase a serious like hoop house. You as a small community gardener, usually there's not, unless they get a grant or something, it's a difficult thing to continue.
Got it.
But a lot of the larger growers, have hoop houses, do year-round composting, all kinds of things like that.
That sure seems like an asset-based community development opportunity for institutions to contribute to a neighborhood.
Isn't there, Howard, like I don't know if it's at a Just Harvest, where they're doing aquaponics with neighborhood folks? I'm not sure if it's a Just Harvest that's doing it.
Yeah, Just Harvest in Rogers Park has in Gale Academy has a hydroponics and aquaponics system. Of course, the folks at Loyola, Aaron, I think they have one of the best models for working perhaps with community folks on thinking about how to apply aquaponics and hydroponics to local spaces, right? Loyola has the magnificent facility as a model for that.
I also want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I can't take much credit. It's really Kevin Erickson, one of my colleagues, who runs and sort of plans how we're going to coordinate with our partners and Edgewater Environmental Sustainability Project and Just Harvest and some of the other community organizations. But there's a lot of interchange with folks who are growers and conditioned spaces, the plant, and other,
I must say they're also expensive devices to run. It requires being on a grid or figuring out a way to get off the grid, which is also an expensive thing to do.
They're definitely 365 systems.
Yeah.
Cool.
I just wanted to also say, I put in the chat a resource list that one of our ABCD faculty members, Jennifer Hirsch, put together. And it's called Engaging Communities and Universities in Climate and Sustainability Learning and Action. It's all very ABCD focused. There are stories of ways this is being done, and there's some in Chicago. And it's a really good, there's a lot of resources on that one page, a lot of links that might be useful.
Thank you. Thank you. John, do you want to tell us more about Sweetwater Foundation? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, Emmanuel Pratt, great guy. We're going to be visiting there with my renewable energy class on October 6th. It's a couple acres outdoors, and it's just a nice little collaboration. It's like a commonwealth is how he describes it. And there's carpentry, there's solar, water harvesters, which is really interesting given the recent news coverage about the city fees for connecting to hydrants and things like that, as well as just, I mean, there's just nothing like a homegrown tomato. So if you haven't had one recently, they're fantastic. Their growing season just finished up, so it's more just visiting, but like a lot of event space. They've got like, some dancing going on there. It's a ball. So I highly recommend it. Check it out. Sweetwater Foundation, Emmanuel Pratt, good group.
Thank you.
And then of course there's Windy City Harvest at City Colleges of Chicago. Have to plug them. It's my job. They're at Arturo Velasquez Institute at 28th and Western, as well as their new farm on Ogden. They do an advanced certificate with us, and it's a pleasure to go to their graduation ceremonies and learn about their aquaponics setups.
Thank you. I'm excited to learn more about these things with being in alignment on this project. The community gardening isn't my job per se, but I think that the more I know, the better. So thank you. And
somebody mentioned the water access. We're almost close to launching another research report that we did on water access in community gardens that kind of is relevant, I think, to some of the issues that were just mentioned around water access that are kind of tightening up at the city level and water department. I don't know if there's anybody at the water department here, but love to talk to you.
Speaking of which, Ian, on our call, I'm looking for Ian. Yeah, there you are. I don't see your face, but on our call 2 months ago, you and Wilson Mora were going to speak about some questionable bills at medical center related to water. Did anything come of that?
We actually, yes, he was able to put in a request to somebody internally. So thank you again for the connection. Unfortunately, I didn't end up hearing back, but we did. My boss knows somebody apparently in the mayor's office, and he was able to get some folks from the Department of Water Management to come out and at least start taking a look. We had one meter that wasn't functioning. And then through the course of time, as we've kind of added onto campus, had a couple areas that were previously metered just as like a general area. And then the new buildings that went up when they did were also sub-metered as City of Chicago accounts. So we may have, as I'm trying to develop a water footprint for Rush, we may be overshooting that by upwards of like 7 to 10 million gallons a year. So, no big deal. But hopefully we've kind of worked through that. We have another meeting scheduled with them next week. So they've been really helpful.
Cool. You just made me think of something, not to be so off topic, but you said water footprint. I heard, I feel like I've attended so many things, I don't know where it was, but recently that carbon footprint, just that term, is putting the onus on us and the footprint that we've created, but the products that the plastic industry has pushed our way you know, and the carbon footprint that's coming with the products are kind of, I don't want to say not our fault, but because we could just not buy them. But it was interesting when the terminology that carbon footprint is a misplacement of, I don't want to say blame, but responsibility. I'm just throwing that out there. I also thought someone said that going into labor when you have a child was also misrepresentation of, you know, that being a job. So anyway, just keeping it light here. So I want to know if there's any final thoughts before I go ahead and wrap up our meeting. It's so great to see everybody. I don't want to rush you, but I want to be respectful of everybody's busy schedules.
Thank you all. I got to run myself. I appreciate the time. Thanks, Kim, for joining me.
Good work. Thank you so much, Howard.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been great. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
You're
Aaron, for
welcome.
making me so thirsty.
I'm seriously, because of Aaron, about to go crack a beer. No kidding.
Yes. Hey, at least he was drinking local. He was just showcasing that he was drinking.
What was it? I noticed it was dark, not dark.
It was alarmist. It was would you say it was an IPA of sorts?
It's yeah, it's a hazy IPA. Not Lejeune, but one of their short-term ones.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Have any of you tried Revolution? Wait, what does that say?
Alarmist.
Alarmist. Okay, nice. The Revolution Brewery not anti-hero, but their hero collection, they've got, I think it's called Tropic Hero, and it's not too sweet and not too fruity, and it's so good. It's my new favorite.
Still holding onto their Sun Crusher.
Well, hey, can I add a not fun note real quick?
John.
If anybody who's doing your water testing for like lead and whatever else, just make sure you test for Legionella too during the reopening, because you know, that's all. Not fun, but
you've been stuck in the bathroom recently, John?